Can you bench 500 pounds raw? We're going to go into this, and we're going to even provide details around what you can do, and we're going to start right now. Let's just say we're starting off at benching 225, right? So this is something that typically we'll see between the ages of like 12 and 15. We have had big hosses bench 225 in 7th and 8th grade. We've actually had kids bench over 300 in 8th grade because they started so early. We'll try to tie reps and tactics and triggers to each milestone. So if we're looking at a 500-pound bench, what I like to think through is if I'm looking at a 225-pound bench, right, then I'm going to look at 250. Then I'm looking at 275. Then I'm going to look at 300, and then we get to 315. So there's two big aspects here. Okay, the milestones are really where I see is like 225, 315, 405. Or if you're working in metric, that'd be 100 kilos, 145 kilos, 180 kilos, 230 kilos. Like those are those sort of milestones, right? The benchmarks are along the way. They're the little pull throughs. So if we are looking at athletes and we're saying, okay, we can definitely bench 225 clean. We know this. We know for a fact. Okay, we know for a fact that if you're training consistently and you can get 70 reps a week on the bench press, okay, so if we're thinking, session 1 is 35 reps, session 2 later on in the week is another 35 reps. Typically, we're going to see about a 10-pound increase for every 168 reps. That's the formula that we're going to use. Then that provides us this ability to look at this and say, okay, over a 4 to 5 month time frame, we'll see kids go from 135. If they're training consistently, they'll work up to 135 within the first 4 months of training with us. Okay. Then if we want to get them to 225, we know that's going to take about 6 months. If we have a kid who's 14, 15 years old to get to 225, it's going to be like, look, we need 6 months for you to hit 70 reps a week. And if you don't hit 70 reps a week, that week doesn't count towards the time. Okay. It actually negates your time. So instead of it being 6 months, now you're actually going 6 months plus 2 weeks, because now you're losing the week of that active training and you're actually adding a week because you missed training. Okay. So we know that basically every single week that you want to take off, you're looking at 2 times that to make up, just 2 times that week. So when you're looking at benching 225 and you have to get 168 reps per week to get, you have to get 168 reps to gain 10 pounds, then you can look at 135 to 225 and say, okay, it's about 1,500 reps. It's going to take us 6 months of consistent training. Consistent. And that's the big aspect here, is that people negate consistency. They'll say, I trained for 6 months. And when you look at the 6 month time frame, 1 week they don't train. The next week they only get 30 reps. The next week they only get 50 reps. Then the next week they get 70. Then they take off for a week because they say they're a little sore, they're overtrained or whatever. So there's just this endless cycle of not actually getting their feet under them. Okay, so the big factor here is that for every 10 pounds, okay, from up to get to 225, it's going to take about 168 reps. Okay, so that's a huge factor that we have to just recognize. Okay, and then when we're looking at it, as we increase, if we think that we want to get to this 500-pound bench and we know it takes 6 months to go from 225 to 315, well, now we're looking at it and we're like, all right, well, it's going to take 6 months. So to get to 500, it's going to take some time. So let's figure this out. Okay, so then we're going, all right, the benchmarks are the 250, the 275, the 300. Those are like the pull throughs. And we like to think about those with kids is like, look, these are the pull throughs to get you to that next spot. The unique part is that once you get to 300, okay, now you bench 315. In the US, that's 3 plates on each side, right? So that's going to take about 340 reps for every 10 pounds. Okay, so that's going to be about 3,060 reps. And if we're trying to get 70 reps per week, right? We're trying to get 70 reps per week. That's going to take 10 months of consistent training. 10 months. Okay, so that's why we'll have some kids who might bench. I'll use myself as an example. By the end of 9th grade, middle of the summer of 9th grade to 10th grade, I could bench 225 for reps. By the following spring, I could hit, so this is my sophomore year, I could hit 315. Okay, I went and did a powerlifting meet and I benched 310 with my butt down. I could bench like 330 with my butt up, so I could hit 315. That was about a 10-month time frame in 10th grade. Okay, so we have 16-year-old kid, let's say they hit that 315. Okay, so now we're looking at that. We're going, the benchmarks from 315 now would be, all right, let's go 350, let's go 375. And then once you hit that 375, you're basically gunning for 405. So the benchmarks from 315, they start to whittle down because now you're just thinking like big picture, big picture, big picture. We know it's possible to bench 225 at an early age. We know that if we're getting 70 reps a week, that's going to be the big time goal. That's going to help us maintain consistency. We know that there's a rep rate of improvement. Okay. So rep rate of improvement. Okay. RRI, rep rate of improvement. Rep rate of improvement. Okay. So if we're looking at that and we go, okay, to go to 315, it's going to be about 340 reps for every 10 pounds. 340 reps. Get done, you gain 10 pounds. That's the typical rep rate of improvement when we're looking at 315. It's going to take you a little more, around a year, okay? But again, we got to hammer home, it's got to be consistent. Some of the tactics that we'll see for 225 to 315, okay, that's where the GS standard hit 50 clap push-ups every single week. That's going to help you, or hit 50 clap push-ups every single night. That's going to help you get to that 315. If you hit 50 clap push-ups every single night, it'll expedite the process. It's a little bit of a cheat code. Okay. So now we hit that 315, right? And we're trying to think about getting to 405. If I'm trying to get to 405, I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, for me to get 10 pounds to get to 405, I'm going to need to do 420 reps. The rep rate of improvement starts to decrease. It takes more time. Okay, so when it takes more time, and then we're looking at this and we're going, all right, if I can get, for every 10 pounds, it's going to take me about 420 reps. Okay, so if I want to increase to 325, 335, okay, that's going to be 420 reps. Then we have to work backwards and say, all right, if we're getting 70 reps a week, to get to those points, it's going to take a lot more work. Okay, your body is starting to adapt slower. Okay, and so to bench 405 in high school, you've got to be hammering like constantly. I will say this is that shortly after, so my senior year of track, I benched 405 literally like 2 weeks after I won the state title. I've seen videos of athletes like Jackson Cantwell currently benching 400 plus for reps, like sets of 5. It is 100% possible to bench 405 in high school. 100%. Here at Garage Strength, I want to say we've probably had, I would say 4 to 5 high school kids. Jeff Klein, Brandon George, Nick Singleton bench 405 in high school. So we're looking at this going, okay, if we can do a 420 rep rate of improvement, that's going to get us 10 pounds. That's going to be about 13 months. Okay. Some of the tactics to get to that 405 are going to be, now we're going to start to play around with things known as trigger sets. Okay. So when we're looking at things like trigger sets, we really want to see if I want to bench 405, I need to have certain reps on the incline bench. Okay, if I want to bench 405, I need to have certain reps and weights on the dumbbell bench. Same thing for dips. Okay, so those things have to be addressed. And we also have to recognize if we want to bench 405, we probably should be back squatting somewhere around the area between 500 and 600 pounds. Okay, so we know that when we back squat a certain load, typically we're going to see that bench will be a percentage of the squat, only from the global perspective. To start to think through the 500 pound rep, being done in a clean perspective, we have to look at examples because it takes quite a bit of time. And when we're looking at things like RRI, okay, the rep rate of improvement, that's going to be something that is rooted in a lot of work. So we're looking at athletes like Eric Favors, Sam Mattis, myself, Tamon Johnson, Alex Rose. These are high-level athletes that have benched 500 pounds. Now, the question about, have these athletes been on performance-enhancing drugs? Are they clean? You can go on USADA. You can look at Sam Mattis's drug testing profile. You can look at all of the drug tests that have been implemented with Sam Mattis. And there's even tests that aren't on there and how long he's been in the testing pool. I'm sure there's comments just infiltrating down below right now that, yeah, typical American thinks his guys are clean and everybody else is dirty. But we do have these drug tests that have been done. We have videos we have our own USADA parking lot at Garage Strength. We literally have a parking space that is designated for USADA because they come in, and now ITA comes in / WADA, and ITA comes in and tests Eric. They just tested Ryan McDonald. They test all of our athletes. So when Sam has been tested, we can look at this. We can look at Eric Favors, who's in the testing pool. We can look at his results. We can look at Alex Rose, and we can look at Alex's results. Based off of these athletes, it has been shown that they are drug-free athletes that have bench pressed 500 pounds. So if we're going to do that, and then we have to look at what has to go into that. Typically, what we see is that athletes will bench press 315. Athletes that have very good benches will bench 315 by sophomore or junior year. They'll bench 405 by senior year of high school or freshman year of college. So that's where we'll see a 405. No, that's around the age of 18 to 19. Okay, so that's typically what we'll see with high-performing athletes. That timeline will be extended by 2 to 3 years depending upon the quality of the individual. If we have an athlete that's not as strong, someone like Jeff Klein actually, by the way, benched, I want to say 440 in high school. I want to say Jeff benched 480 about 3.5 years later. So what we tend to see is that when athletes that haven't benched 315 at 15 or 16 years old, they haven't done this as a sophomore in high school, we might see someone bench 315 as a senior in high school at 18. And then they might bench 405 by the end of their senior year of college. Okay, so we see this 4-year lag. And then we see a very extended time horizon for them to get to the point of where they would bench 500. Now, we mentioned earlier that to bench 405, you need to get 3,780 reps, and that's typically going to take you about 13 months, so it's a little more than a year to get the bench 405. Because the rep rate of improvement is 420 reps equals 10 pounds, now we can do this. It's going to be about 13 months to get to that point for 405. The thing we have to bring up here is that if we're getting 70 reps a week done, okay, and we can stay healthy, we still have to build in probably 2 weeks where there's going to be a lag where we back off from training or don't train at all, and probably another 3 to 4 weeks where we deload and we decrease the number of reps we can get. So the timeline might be 13 months, but in essence, that 13 months is of strictly training. It's probably going to take you about 2 to 3 plus years to get there, at least. Now, the rep rate is going to be about the same. So to bench 500 pounds clean, okay, our rep rate of improvement is going to be around 1,680 reps for 10 pounds, okay? 1,680 reps for 10 pounds. So fortunately, we can look at the training results of someone like Eric Favors, someone like Sam Mattis, someone like myself, somebody like Alex Rose, Tamon Johnson, who just benched 500 pounds, 4 or 5 months ago. And we can look at how many total reps does it take to get to that point. Remember now, the milestone is 500 pounds. From 405 to 500, there needs to be benchmarks. Okay, so if we're looking at benchmarks as 440 pounds, 400, I honestly think that it typically goes 440 to 485 pounds. Looking at someone like Lucas Warning, the same thing has to come to light, is that we have to look at, same with Lucas, is that when he benched 440, when he benched 220 kilos, those were huge benchmarks. And the benchmarks are on the way to the milestone. That's why we had mentioned Jeff Klein, end of college, bench 480. That's going towards that milestone. It's a benchmark. We know that to get there, okay, it's going to take us 1,680 reps for every 10 pounds. Okay, so if we do the math of 95 pounds, we know that it's going to take us about 15,120 total reps. 15,120 total reps. And so if we're averaging 70 reps per week, okay, that's going to take us 4 years. So if you're an athlete and you're trying to increase that bench press, you want to hit these monster milestones, click on the link down below, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store, download Peak Strength, then select that you want to increase your overall strength. That's your main goal. Once you increase your overall strength, we're going to ask you, what's your max right now? You've got to tell us your max so we can help you get to the next benchmark. The benchmarks are the pull-throughs that then help you hit those big-time milestones. Start your journey today to benching these big-time milestones. Now, let's get back to if you can bench 500 pounds without drugs. 15,120 reps. That's going to take us 4 years. So if I graduate college, I'm 22, which I graduated college when I was 22, okay? Ironically. I bench pressed 500 pounds right around the time, right before I turned 28. Okay, so that was about 5 years. What ends up happening is that we're looking at a 4-year stint of reps, 70 reps per week. Okay, now there's factors here because now we're starting to push very high load. So we need to make sure that we're staying healthy. There's going to be points that not only do we have to stay healthy, but there's also going to be points where we need a deload. There's things like life come into play. You know, during that time frame from 22 to 28, my oldest son was born. So Lincoln was born. I had to manage having a newborn, bringing that into my schedule and recognizing that some weeks I wasn't going to get 70 reps per week because I couldn't bench enough. So all those things get factored in. So that's where we might see this 4-year time frame could go from 4 years to 6 or 7 just based off of the fact that it takes a while to get there. The vast majority of athletes, and I would also say this, for you to bench 500 pounds, if you weigh over 225 pounds, I would say 95% of the individuals that I know that have benched 500 weigh over 225 pounds. Okay, so that's another big aspect here, is that we've got to get big. Like, you've got to be heavy. And we also know, and this is another big one, is we've had athletes come in, they say they want to bench 405, they say they want to bench 500 pounds, and we'll say, okay, we got to squat, we got to make sure we're cleaning, we got to make sure we're front squatting and we're snatching, and they'll say things like, well, I don't really want to do legs. And the problem here is that if we can think about global neurological activation, okay, we will be able to be more explosive and stronger if we can get greater neural stimulus from exercises like squats and cleans and snatches. Okay, those movements require more coordination. They require more effort and energy from our brain to actively push. So that's where those exercises have a tremendous carryover. Now, I'm also going to bring up a study that when I had our podcast with Menno Henselmans, Menno had mentioned about how the size of the pec has a direct correlation to strength. Okay, so there's this research paper where they actually break down fat-free mass in powerlifters. Okay, so there's actually, I'm pretty sure there's 2 studies here that Menno was talking about. They look at fat-free mass, so basically muscle and bone, and the amount of fat-free mass, so muscle and bone, the amount of muscle was a direct predictor of strength. So a lot of people will still argue like big muscle doesn't mean you're strong, but in this research paper, the powerlifters that had larger muscles were stronger. Okay, it's that simple. Like literally, it's get big, get stronger. Okay, so the other paper is that the direct correlation that was found for a large bench press was from the athletes that had larger pecs. So if you have a larger chest or larger triceps, you will bench more, period. Okay, like this is it. So we've got to factor that in when we're trying to go from that 405 to a 500 pound bench press. Okay, we have to think through that lens. And so if you bench press, let's say 405 and you're already weighing 270, we've got to try to find the low hanging fruit so that we can get your chest bigger, your shoulders bigger, your triceps bigger. And that takes us to the next aspect, is this is where the trigger sets come into play. If I'm looking at somebody benching 500 pounds, okay, I actually like to think back and I go, okay, when I bench 500 pounds, what did I do? Well, I can tell you that I could dip over 300 pounds when I was weighing 270. So if I'm looking at that and I'm saying I'm 270, I could dip 315, that puts me right around that 585 pound max. Okay, so we hit a heavy dip. Typically what we'll see is somebody will hit a 3 rep max around 500 pounds, okay, on dips. So that includes the weight that they're hanging plus their body weight. If they can hit a triple at 500 pounds, they're going to bench 500. I will guarantee this, okay, because you will have an insane amount of tricep strength. If we're looking at a 5 rep max on the dips, okay, typically that'll be around 465 pounds or 210 kilos, a little more than 210 kilos. So when we're looking at these trigger sets, if we're testing somebody and they need to get to a 500 pound bench, we can now look at this and say, okay, where's their dip? Okay, so their dip, let's say their dip is at like 95% of the numbers I just provided. The next thing I do, for me, I did the 165s for 12 reps on bench press, on dumbbell bench. Okay, so if we're talking about dumbbell bench, typically, if you can dumbbell bench the 165s for 10, you're going to be able to hit that 500 pound bench press. And if we're looking at 5 reps, we're looking at 180 pound dumbbells. Now, the issue becomes not a lot of places have heavy dumbbells. Okay, we're fortunate we go up to 165s, but we don't have anything heavier than 165s. So that's where you got to start toying around with other movements now, like the incline bench. So the unique part is that incline and dips you can pretty much do in most places. The downfall of dips is that some people don't have the best weighted belts. Okay, so we've used various belts. I've used a tree climbing belt. Charles Poliquin had told us that some of the best ways to do heavy dips is to actually use a tree climbing belt because the weight is more centered, which it is. Fantastic. So we've used that. We've used normal traditional belts as well to hang weights. The other factor here is it's still just clunky sometimes to hang a lot of weight in between your privates. Yeah, it can be a little bit of a pain. So dips and dumbbell bench can be a limiting factor, but that's where we get into the incline bench. Okay, so if we're looking at incline bench, we want to make sure that minimum we're incline benching 345 for 5 minimum. This is an absolute minimum. And what I like to look at is that at the time, okay, I'm flashbacking, I bench 430 on the incline. Okay, when I bench 430 on the incline, 2 weeks later, I bench 500 pounds. And what we've seen here is that athletes that can bench 430 will have almost an immediate direct correlation. Athletes that incline bench like 420 to 430 will almost immediately go over on the flat bench and they will hit a 500 pound bench. Typically, we see that that's going to be around an 80%, a little higher than 80% carryover. Okay, so if we're going to hit a 5 rep max, we're going to be around 345 to 350 on the incline. Okay, we're going to hit around a 300 pound bench for a set on the incline for a set of 10. So if you can get 300 for 10, 315 for 10 on the incline, you're probably going to be really close to hitting a 425 incline bench. Okay, typically if you're doing 315 to 330 for 10, you're like getting in, you're going to be hammering to bench that 500 pounds. Now, going back to the size of the muscle, going back to the time. Okay, so we're looking at the key factors here. The rep rate of improvement is huge. Okay, so it's going to be about 1,680 reps for 10 pounds. That's going to give us 4 years. When we start to think through, okay, if we can bench, let's say 405 at the age of 21 to 23, typically we should be able to hit 500 prior to us turning 30. Okay, and when we think in these time horizons, I think that's the biggest issue here is that, Sam Mattis's first 500-pound bench, I want to say he was 26. Taman was 27. Alex was 28. Lucas was 28. David Lucas actually benched 475, 27. You start to see these athletes with really long limbs even. It takes 4 to 6 years to fulfill the time. So the big factor I'm going to challenge everybody on is that you got to give yourself time. You have to say, like, I'm 21 right now. If I can get on a program and follow it and hit 70 reps a week, I want to give myself 8 to 10 years. And then I'm going to look at key aspects. So inside Peak Strength, we have mobility for this. So we have mobility programs that you would use for stretching, things like that. For us, I'm looking at there's key factors. First, if you can do this, okay, the mobility that we want to focus on is scorpion stretch, prayer stretch, let's say like thoracic extension work, thoracic rotation work. Those are mobility exercises, lengthening your lats, that I really, really like to help you maintain health in your shoulders, in your triceps, and in your pecs. Okay, because it can become quite stressful. So we're looking at mobility, then we're looking at accessories. Okay, so now if we're looking at the accessories that we need, we've got to look at triceps, so Miracle Grow, tel extensions. We got to look at even I would consider accessories like a dumbbell military press, a PA press. I even think that focusing on flywheel tricep pushdowns, a seated Miracle Grow. These are like accessories that we can go heavy, but also accessories that we want to hit with pretty big weight. Then we're going to look at those trigger sets. Okay, so then trigger sets, we're looking at incline bench. We want to get 300 to 315 for 10. We want to max 425 on the incline. We want to dumbbell bench the 165s for 10. Okay, we want to get on dips and have a total of around 500 pounds for reps on the dips, including your body weight. Okay, so those are the trigger sets. And then when we look at that, we want to look at your big strength lifts. So where is your back squat? Where is your deadlift? Where is your clean? When Sam benched 500 pounds for the first time, he's benched 240 since, so kilos, that's 530. Sam could jerk 500 pounds. He could clean 200 kilos, which is 440 pounds. So we have to look at these other big lifts and how they play into it. So the strength lifts matter because that's going to lead to that important programming aspect. And then what we do is we look at the main lifts. We look at the main strength lifts. Okay. And then we look at the trigger sets. And then we can see in the trigger set where there might be some type of area to make up. Let's say that you bench 365 for a set of 5 on the incline. So you've got the number, you have the trigger set. You should be able to bench 500 pounds. But then you can only do dumbbell benches with like 150s. And that was something that Taman struggled with. He would dumbbell bench the 150s. He'd flare his elbows out and he'd miss the groove very consistently when he would go max 500. The day he hit 500 for the first time, he actually missed it and then went back and he smoked it. And the thing that I'm going to push people on here is that when you get dialed in with technique on lifts like cleans and snatches and jerks, and you're training like an athlete, you start to realize how important technique is. Okay, so if you bench and you're hitting a bench and you hit just a little bit too low or a little bit too high, you get out of position, you're screwed. It's very clear. Like, you can feel it immediately. The clean, the snatch, and the jerk it's even greater. If you get out of position, you're done. So what those lifts do, what those big lifts do, like a snatch, like a deadlift, like a squat, like a clean, is they teach you the priority around having good technique. So then when you take the weight off and you're going to hammer a big bench, you're more dialed in on your technique. And then if you're going back to the trigger sets, and if you're looking at your incline is good, but your dumbbell bench stinks, well, now we can try and target the weakness in the dumbbell bench. Typically, if somebody's dumbbell bench sucks, their dips suck. And then we start to prioritize in our training. Now we're going to hit more dumbbell benches. Now we're going to hit more dips. Then in the accessories, now we're going to hit more tricep work. Now we're going to hit tricep work in this specific position. Some people are very, very bad pressing on the tris, whereas overhead, they're decent. So we need to focus on maybe close grip bench, maybe floor bench, maybe a neutral grip bench press. Okay, maybe a banded neutral grip bench press. So we can start to play around with those different factors. So then when we work backwards and we're saying that, okay, now some of the other accessories, and this would be where I would call these supporting. Okay, we want to look at supporting accessories as meadow swings, Y's on the incline, dumbbell external rotations. We want to push a dumbbell external rotation to like 40 pounds for reps with a controlled eccentric. We need to push those key numbers to make sure our shoulders stay healthy. We need to make sure we're pushing the mobility with those key mobilizing exercises, scorpion stretch, door stretch, lengthening the lats. And that's another big factor. I want to bring a little side tangent. One thing I want to bring up around the snatch is that if we're snatching and we're overhead in a good stable position, typically we see athletes that have a huge snatch will bench a lot because they're very stable in their shoulder. And when they're stable in their shoulder, they're also stable in the catch with their elbows. Okay, their elbows are strong. And then they get really good at muscle snatches. And then guess what? And this is something that people don't comprehend, is that one of the absolute best ways to improve your bench is to actually get good at muscle snatches. And people that, what? What do you mean? Well, guess what? External rotation here helps build that upper back, helps build the lats. And if we're getting here and we're turning over on the muscle snatch, then when we go on the bench and we're able to sit on the bench and go here and then execute, because remember, we're training athletes, so we're going to be doing muscle snatches and sometimes, and that's going to strengthen their shoulders. And the more that we can stay strong and play this game of, we go shoulders, triceps, pecs, shoulders, triceps, pecs, and we cycle through accessories, we cycle through mobility movements, we cycle through the big movements to try and strengthen certain positions, we cycle through the variations of the bench, and we're looking at everything and we're just playing that game. We know the shoulders, we know the pecs, we know the triceps, and then we start to play the game of, let's make sure our shoulders stay healthy, let's make sure that we're taking care of everything. It makes it easier to get those 15,000 reps done in that 4-year time frame. And if we can get the 15,000 reps done in that 4-year time frame, now we can get 1,680 reps done. We get 10 pounds, and every single time it's just a notch. Every time we get 1,680 reps done, 10 pounds. Okay, another 1,680, 10 pounds. And we just keep chipping away and chipping away and chipping away. And we play the game back and forth, back and forth. And the other thing I'm going to say here is there's a fine line that we push with the athlete where we want to think through, if we want to get to 500 pounds, let's get to 200K first. Let's get to 220K first. That's 440, 480, 484. We also want to play the game that if I see somebody, so let's take Lucas for an example. Lucas tends to flare his elbows pretty bad. So we pushed the shit out of inclines for a while. We need to build the shoulders, build his freaking triceps like crazy with the incline bench and just push it. And the longer, I like to think about this, where we go longer and longer and longer, pushing the same lift over and over and over again. And we want to get right to that line where if we keep pushing it, they might get hurt. So then we get right to that line where we think, okay, this is enough. We've been on this program where we're pushing incline benches for 12 weeks, 13 weeks, 14 weeks. Now we got to back off and we go from incline bench to dumbbell or incline bench to dips, depending upon what we're seeing. Because then when we back down, off of that, we go to the next movement. And if we see that movement making good progress, we want to push it again. And we try to look at the timeline of, okay, well, we pushed incline bench for 13 weeks. Let's try and push dips for 13 weeks. And then we can start to see some adaptations occur. Okay. And then, all right, well, let's test the bench again. Did we go up 15, 20 pounds on the bench? What ended up happening there over 6 months? And then we can go through and we look at that over a 4-year time frame. And now all of a sudden you're 27, 28, and you can do this successfully. The biggest factor is that you've got to stay healthy. You've got to know the accessories. You've got to know the trigger sets. You've got to know the mobility. You've got to know, you have to train legs. You have to do explosive movements. And you have to know if you're feeling good on a certain day, dude, just push it. Just go for it. And the big factor here is that we've got these athletes in the testing pool. We've got evidence from Eric Favors. We've got Sam Mattis. We've got Alex Eros. We've got Taman Johnson. We've got Lucas Warning. We've got Jeff Klein. We've got all of these athletes that have benched over 500 pounds. It is possible. It just comes down to looking at the rep rate of improvement. Understand the milestones, understand the benchmarks, understand the accessories, the mobility, the trigger sets, the strength lifts, and recognize it's going to take time to get there. You have to be realistic. You have to say to yourself, for me, if I can bench 315 by 16 to 18, then I want to bench 405 by 21 to 23, and then I want to bench 500 before I'm 30. That's what it takes to bench 500 pounds clean. You guys need help with your programming, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. We got a powerlifting program in there that is freaking awesome that'll help you hit that 500-pound bench. If you want other content similar to this, click on this card right here. Because remember, freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.